Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we have here as the Sabbath hours are approaching. At least here it's not Sabbath yet. And we just ask, Lord, that your Spirit can be our teacher as we go through some more chronology, but also messages that we believe can help us to understand the time that we're in and to understand prophecy better. We just pray for each person who is either watching this online or is participating now. May your angels be around us. May your Holy Spirit speak to us. We ask for forgiveness for our sins, for the doubts that we have at times, and the struggles that we have that are the result of our lack of faith. We just ask, Lord, that you can increase our faith as we study these things together. Help us to understand the things we study and to be able to share them with others. We thank you and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, this is a study on the dark day and its connection to the present time. And I'm sure all of us are familiar with the dark day, 1780. And this was May 19th, 1780. This is Ellen White records this in The Great Controversy, and we will read that first before we get into it. Now, the connection of the dark day to our time is rather interesting. But I'm going to read this Great Controversy passage first. And I'll put it up on the screen, so I'll share this so people can see it. If you have at least a large enough screen to see it. You may not be able to see it. Yeah, it's not very big in here. I probably should create it so that my I have a larger font. And, I don't know how to do that. I'll zoom. Look it this way. There.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. So Ellen White's talking about all these harbingers. These are all the events that were marking that the prophetic periods were going to come to a close. And so there's lots connected to it. So I'm just going to go back and read a ways. She talks about the Lisbon earthquake, and so that's one of the signs. And so that was in 18. What was the Lisbon earthquake? I probably should put these all on the line. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, that was 1755. Well, let's read some of these passages here. We'll read this section. She says, prophecy not only foretells the manner and object of Christ's coming, but it presents tokens by which men are to know when it is near. Said Jesus, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars of the heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in the heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. The Revelator thus describes the first of the signs to precede the second advent. There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. These signs were witnessed before the opening of the 19th century In fulfillment of this prophecy, there occurred in the year 1755 the most terrible earthquake that has ever been recorded. Though commonly known as the earthquake of Lisbon, it extended to the greater part of Europe, Africa, and America. It was felt in Greenland, in the West Indies, in the Isles of Madeira, in Norway, in Sweden, Great Britain, and Ireland. It pervaded an extent of not less than 4 million square miles. In Africa, the shock was almost as severe as in Europe. A great part of Algiers was destroyed, and a short distance from Morocco, a village containing 8,000 or 10,000 inhabitants was swallowed up. The vast waves swept over the coast of Spain and Africa, engulfing cities and causing great destruction. So obviously there was a tsunami connected with this earthquake. And so we know that's 1755. I was just trying to see if there was an actual date, probably in history. I could have looked this up if I'd been thinking about it. But over here we have this Lisbon earthquake. So I know you can't see the board right now, but I'm just writing this in here. I'm not going to switch back and forth yet. We can look at these later. And there's 25 years between the Lisbon earthquake and the dark day. So she says, 25 years later appeared the next sign mentioned in the prophecy, the darkening of the sun and moon. What rendered this more striking was the fact that the time of its fulfillment had been definitely pointed out. In the Savior's conversation with his disciples upon Olivet, after describing the long period of trial for the church, the 1260 years of papal persecution, concerning which he had promised that the tribulation should be shortened, he thus mentioned certain events to precede his coming and fixed the time when the first of these should be witnessed. In those days, after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. Mark 13:24. The 1260 days or years terminated in 1798. A quarter of a century earlier, persecution had almost wholly ceased. Following this persecution, according to the words of Christ, the sun was to be darkened. On the 19th of May, 1780, this prophecy was fulfilled. If not altogether alone, as the most mysterious and yet unexplained phenomenon of its kind, stands the dark day of May 19th, 1780, a most unaccountable darkening of the whole visible heavens and atmosphere in New England. So it's going to describe the things that happened. Of course, it was dark during the day. In the evening, the sun did sort of appear briefly, but it was still obscured, and then they experienced a darkness at night. And I'm trying to find this, so I'm just skipping a bunch of it. It's just description of the dark day. May 19th, 1780 stands in history as the dark day. Since the time of Moses, no period of darkness of equal density, extent, and duration had ever been recorded. The description of this event, as given by eyewitnesses, is but an echo of the words of the Lord, recorded by the prophet Joel 2,500 years previous to their fulfillment. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. So Ellen White gives us this time element. So we're going to look at this time element here. She says that this was prophesied 2,500 years before. So if you go from here and you go back 2,500 years, 2,500 years, you come to 721 BC. And this is the year that Samaria falls. And Samaria falls in the spring, around the time of March, around the time of the equinox, in the spring of 721 BC. And but this would put us to May, if we just put in May 19th. So if this was exact, and we were looking at May 19th, 721 BC, this would be Joel. This would be exactly 2,500 years. Now, of course, I don't think that she means it's exactly 2,500 years. But if it is 2,500 years, even within the year, there's something about this year, 721 BC, and this year, 780. So these 2 years are connected by the biblical calendar. So we're going to look at that in a minute. Now we know also that in 1798, we have these 2,500 years, but we know there's 18 years. Now, of course, this would be 18 years to 1798. But if we go back here, and we know that Hoshea was taken captive in 723, because these are the events connected with here, you can see that the 2520 is hinted at by this in the spirit of prophecy, in that she's marking the close of the 1260 years, but she's reaching back to an event that's connected with the start of the 2520 years. So she's, in an indirect way, representing the 2520. Now, this is another way in which I could represent the 2520, is I could go through this history and explain it this way to someone and say that there's this fall of Samaria connected with the captivity of Hoshea, and that's 2520 years to 1798. I'd obviously take a bit more time to lay this out, but you can see this 2,500 years that she's using is obviously connected to the 2520. And that's why she can go back to this history here. So there's these tokens that we have. We have this earthquake, and we have this dark day. And the other event that we're going to have is the falling of the stars. And those are going to occur in, I remember correctly, 1833. So you have the falling of the stars. So this other event, and these are all tokens. Some of them come before the end of the 2520 and the 1260, and this one comes afterwards. And this one, of course, the significance of this year would be when Miller receives his credentials as well. So there's all these tokens marking these events that are closing the prophetic periods, and they're marking or reaching forward to the end of the 2300 days and the 2520 for Judah. Now, if anybody has any questions on this or any comments, feel free to comment. It's not, I don't necessarily want to be just talking all the time by myself. And let's just see where she has the falling of the stars here. I'm just looking at this. She doesn't give the actual date for that here that I can see. But if anybody wants to give me the date for the falling of the stars, not just the year, but the date in which it occurred, I probably have it in my notes actually. If I would look there. Okay, so I'm gonna bring up some of my notes here, share them on the screen. Oops, did that wrong, as I do once in a while. Let's click on this correctly. Okay.
I have stars fell November 13th, 1833.
That's it. Yeah, I should have known that one. So this is November 13th, 1833. And if somebody has the date for the Lisbon earthquake, it would be nice. But I did have that in my notes, the falling of the star for it. It's just, I wrote about this here, and what I'm going to do is you got to turn off your phone. I think someone has it. Dana probably has her sound on. Thanks. Now, the biblical date upon which Samaria fell, because it fell in early April, but if we look at this biblical date in which the falling of the stars, or not the falling of the stars, but the dark day occurred, in May 9th, 1780, it lines up with May of 1721. And in both of those dates, if we take the Julian date in 721 of May 19th, and the Gregorian date of May 19th in 1780, both of these dates are on the same biblical date, and that is the dark day occurred on the 13th to the 14th day of the second month. Now, this is the date of the second Passover. So it says in Numbers 9:11, the 14th day of the second month at even shall they keep it and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Now, some of you may be familiar with the significance of the second Passover in our history. It has to do with a message about the priests and the Levites. So we did a study back, I'm trying to think how long ago this was, but it would have been a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. We studied 2 Chronicles, chapter 29 and 30. And what happened is when Hezekiah came to the throne, he invited the people of Samaria and northern Israel to a Passover. Now, the reason why he did this, there's a number of things. First is they began to cleanse the sanctuary on the first day of the first month by the priests, and then the court was cleaned for the next 8 days by the Levites. And so we have this line. I'm gonna draw this here for people, which Jeff has presented a number of times, which he believes is very significant, and I do too, though I don't know if we fully understand it completely. But they start on the first day of the first month, and they work till the eighth day of the first month, and then they continue to the 16th day of the first month. And this is done by the priests, and this is done by the Levites. So you have this priest and Levites cleansing the sanctuary and the courtyard. So the whole temple area is cleansed by these two groups of people. And of course, these symbolize these 8 days, and these 8 days become an important symbol. And there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to do a complete study on this, but that's in 2 Chronicles where you read about this, and in chapter 29, and in chapter 30, it continues. Now, this is before the destruction of Samaria. If you're going to go back and look at this history, Ellen White says it's actually about 2 years, 725. So it's about 2 years before Hoshea is taken captive. And it could be 726. So it's unclear exactly how we were to count this, but she says 2 years. So if you strictly looked at this, it probably would be 725. So we're just going to leave it at that. There's something about this that we have to sort out. We're not going to do that now. But Ellen White talks about this period of time here before Hoshea is taken captive. This is when the siege of Samaria. Yeah.
Lisbon earthquake was November 1st, 1755.
Thank you. So the interesting thing here is when we start to look at this date here, May 19th, this is going to be the time when the Passover lamb is slain, from the 13th to the 14th, because it starts in the day, but it's going to end in the evening. So I'm just going to put here that it's to the 13th to the 14th day of the second month. So this is the second month. 13th. This way. 13th to the 14th day of the second month. And so this would be the second Passover. And this date here in 721 BC, if you looked at May 9th on the Julian, it would also be the 13th to the 14th that you would have that second Passover. It's at sunset on the 13th, which begins the 14th, that the second Passover would begin. So it's also in the second month. That is, these two calendars for these 2 years are identical in the relationship here with the Julian, and this is the relationship with the Gregorian calendar. So obviously, if you use the Julian calendar here, it would be a different date. If you use the Gregorian here, it'd be a different date than this. But in their relationship in the symbols, we have the May 19th date, which lines up with the second Passover. So this idea of the second Passover is also connecting us to this history, because this is the first time after the Exodus that they had, that we have a record of them keeping the second Passover. They obviously had kept it for people who were wanderers and so forth that couldn't keep the first Passover. But here it's instituted, and it's given as an offering, an invitation to northern Israel. So Judah is making this invitation to the northern tribes before the siege of Samaria, before the destruction of Samaria, to participate in this Passover in Jerusalem. So it's very, very significant in that symbolism that's attached here when we start to look at our history. So an invitation to a group of people that's being offered here. Now, there's a lot more to it, but we know that the priests and the Levites are also connected with this. And the priests and the Levites, they're then part of Judah, God's church. They represent the Seventh-day Adventist church now. And we're making an invitation to another group of people, which we would have to say are Protestants. That is, in this history, northern Israel represents the false prophet, where in 1798, the false prophet arises. And it's going to have an invitation given to it through the Millerite movement to accept the truths related to this, and that Jesus is going to come back. But they're going to basically reject that invitation over here on April 19th, 1844. They will have rejected it and closed their probation as Protestants, and that will be the fall of the first horn. So this history that Ellen White just lays out here in connecting this dark day back to this history becomes very significant when we look at the dates that are connected with it. Now, I began looking at this quite a while ago, not in May of 2019, but earlier than that, I had looked at it. Actually, back in 2018, started looking at this a little bit. But there was a few people who sent me studies dealing with this second Passover in our history. So we're just going to jump over here to our history. And there's lots here, and I'm not sure if I can go through everything here, but I'm just going to write this date, May 19th, 2019. So we're going to look at this date, May 19th, 2019. Now, back in 2018, we started to make predictions. We started to say that we could make predictions about events in the future in regard to time. And the first prediction, if you want to call it that I made, had to do with the spring of 2019. And that was based upon a study on the week of Christ. And in that study on the week of Christ, I had marked a number of dates. I didn't know which date to pick. I had marked April 8th, April 19th, April 18th, May 2nd. So I had a number of dates that I had connected with Judas's betrayal. Now, ultimately, I've decided that the date that was really connected with Judas's betrayal is the date after Jeff began his retirement, and he had passed the baton, which he had no right to pass, but he had passed it over to Parminder. And this the date ultimately we would call, April 9th, 2019. And the day before Jeff had done his, he had basically stepped into retirement. We could even put April 8th. We could even say April 7th, which is the last day he did a sermon. So I'm actually going to write it here, April. It's going to be, we will say the 7th to the 9th. Now we know that, it's not April, pardon me. This would be, I'm doing some, yeah, it's April. That's right. It's April. Never mind. April 9th. And this would be March 27th on the Julian calendar. So April 9th would be March 27th on the Julian. And this March 27th, 2019 date was a date that's a center of a chiasm. So I know this starts to become lots of information, but we know we had October 13th, 2018, and September 7th, 2019. And in between these two dates was March 27th, 2019. And so this number here, March 27th, is a symbol of the Levites, 273, so the 27th day of the third month. And so we knew that this had something to do with the Levites. This is noon, October 13th, where I counted 391 and a half days to November 9th. And then this is noon, September 7th, where Jeff was presenting in Arkansas, and I was in Warburg, Alberta, making a calculation showing that to November 9th was 63 days. And that when Jeff spoke here at this time, September 7th is 9 times 7, which is 63. And this was also on the biblical date significant. I'm going to leave that detail out. But this becomes a significant event because it's the 6th day of the 6th month, I believe. And it's connected with the 36 weeks. But I'm going to leave all that stuff out. So this center of this chiasm marked March 27th. Now later on, we came to recognize March 27th, 2021 as part of the 777 chiasm or structure dealing with July 18th, March 27th, December 25th, 2021, and November 9th, 2019. So we had that end date, March 27th. And we also had March 27th, 2020. And it was on March 27th, 2020 that I actually understood the significance of the March 27th chiasm. So this is the chiasm dealing with the Levites. We could call it the Levitical chiasm. So there's a bunch of things there that I'm just touching on. The point is here, when we look at this history now, we're going to come back to this history. We know that I had made this prediction regarding April or maybe even into May, that this betrayal of Judas was going to happen. So Judas's betrayal of Christ was typified. Now, I'm not going to go into that whole study right now, but it is other places where I go through the week of Christ. And those studies were initially presented at the School of the Prophets in 2018, back in September. And they were also presented at the camp meeting in Arkansas in 2018 in October. So they were well represented. They were well presented. They were understood to the significance, at least, of what I was predicting. But I didn't really know what I was predicting. That is, Judas is going to betray Christ. The question is, who's Judas? Who's Christ? How does that betrayal going to play out? And that I had no idea about back in 2018. Really, I didn't have any idea about that until March 27th, 2020, that I then understood completely what had happened. Because I didn't really know the history of what had occurred until much later. So that history came out gradually, and then I was able to place that history. And so Elder Jeff has presented that, these March 27th, and how they're connected. But the symbol of 273, the way that it was actually presented to me, or the way that I came to understand it, is I was looking at some of these numbers, and the one number I was looking at was, so it's always interesting to me anyway, how things gradually unfold. They don't all show up at once. We come to understand things over time, and so I was looking at some of these numbers. I have a website that I go to called Number Empire. And so I was typing some of these numbers in there and looking at their properties. And the number that I looked up was, I believe it was 391, but I could be wrong. It might have been another number. I always forget which numbers go where. Yes. It was the number 187. So there's a few of these numbers I looked up. I can show this to you here. I'll just blow this up and put it on the screen for you to see. Oops, I always do that. Okay. So what I had looked up was the number 187. So I was looking up this number, and there's lots of significance in the number 187. Of course, we know that's about the prediction, July 18th, 2020. And when you put a number in this program, you know, it'll show you the factorization, which is 11 times 17, are the only two numbers that aren't 1 or 187 that when multiplied together become 187. So they're very significant numbers. They show up in lots of different ways. It's interesting that the sum of the divisors is 216. Now, a lot of people don't know the significance of 216, but if you take 6 times 6 times 6, you get 216. So it's a symbol of 666, and 666 is related to Islam as well, because it's a satanic number, and Islam is a satanic power. It comes out of the bottomless pit. We also have other things. The interesting thing here, if you look at the number 187, the 187th prime is 1117. And if you remember, if you looked back here, you could see 11 times 17 equals 187. But the number 1117 is the 187th prime number. So there's this characteristic that the number 187 has in its relationships to its factorization. A very strange relationship. As far as I know, it's the only number that does that. I haven't been able to find any other number that does. And then they will show these numbers represented as binary numbers, so that's computer language. And there's other numbering systems that computer programmers use. One of them is called an octal. That's just a base 8. So binary is base 2, octal is base 8. And the octal of 187 is 273. So 273, when my attention was drawn to 273, was connected to studying July 18th as a number, 187. So that was very significant to me in understanding that. So I'm just gonna, and I hope that, I know I don't like always introducing all this math stuff, but it becomes significant. I think people can see the significance of it on just a simple level, that there's these connections between these numbers. And in that number empire, if you put, for instance, 391, which is our another number for Islam, you'll find that the hexadecimal, which is, it's double base 8, so it's base 16, is 187. And that if you put the number 264 in, you get in a base 32, which you're doubling that again, you get 88. And of course, 88 is a significant number, as we showed, dealing with the priests and the Levites cleansing the temple. So we're back to these notes. And so I addressed that, and I'm just going to show you here what happens. Now, it's probably very tiny. So this is taken from the calendar converter. And you can see in 2019, May 19th is the 13th of ER. So it's the day, technically the day before. And so that would be May 19th to 20th would parallel 1780, where you have May 19th to 20th being the 13th and the 14th. So these are parallel years. So that means 2019 has the same characteristic. So this alignment of dates occurs 1 in 30 times. So it's so obviously it's not like astronomically impossible that these dates are going to be the same. But the fact that we made this connection between the prediction of Judas' betrayal and the spring of 2019, and we can see this connection with the dark day, it seemed to me logical to look at it in more detail. So I wanted to see the connection between 1780 and 2019. Is there a connection? Is there not a connection? Now, in order to understand that connection, I really needed to look at some of these things themselves, some of these dates themselves. Now, the 12th day of the first month, which is the date that Judas betrayed Christ. So it's 2 days before the Passover that Judas's betrayal occurs. So it's in the first month, not the second month. And Judas's betrayal this is the time he goes to receive the money from the priests, and that happens on the 12th day of the first month. Now, some of you who've seen the other studies will have recognized that Miller chose the 12th day of the first month as the day that Jesus was crucified, and also he connected it back to the 12th day of the first month in 457 BC, when Ezra and the priests and Levites left the river Ahava. And so he marks that as the going forth of the commandment. And he says it was fulfilled exactly 490 years to the day in 33 AD. So he had the 70 weeks end at the end of the 70th week, not in the middle. He had the crucifixion of Christ marking the end of it. So that 12th day of the first month also becomes an important number. And I was studying this and only came to understand that Miller had used the 12th day of the first month shortly before I had presented the study on the week of Christ. So when I started to see that the betrayal of Christ by Judas was going to occur on the 12th day of the first month, which lines up with our history. And it's a whole study. Some may not understand how I'm connecting those, but I'm looking at our history that represents the year 2019. So in 2019, but what I didn't have is a way to figure out how do I connect the date, because I could use the Julian date, I could use the biblical date in 2019 that aligned with the 12th day of the first month, which would be April 18th. I could use the Gregorian date. I mean, there's just different ways in which I could understand how to mark that date. So my argument was it was in the spring, and that we wouldn't know until after it happened what the betrayal was and when it occurred. And so my advice to people was to wait and see. But I also believe that we would not understand it fully until long after. That is, whatever was going to happen wasn't going to be known, a week later or a month later. It was going to be months later that we would be able to look back and see what were the events involved. So what I did is I took the 12th day of the first month. So I'm just going to read this here. It says, the purpose of these tokens, and we'll also look at the falling of the stars in 1833, are harbingers of the coming judgment that begins with the end of the 2520 for Judah on October 22nd, 1844. So they're marking their warnings or tokens or harbingers of what's going to happen in the future, the beginning of the judgment. From 1844 to 2019 is 175 years. So I'm just counting the number of years from 1844 to 2019. And I note that it's 175 years. And this is a significant number in the context of Judas' betrayal, in that the date of Judas' betrayal was April 18th, 2019. That is, if I'm putting it the 12th day of the first month, that date, and I put it on April 18th, 2019, it's the same biblical date as the 12th day of the first month when Judas betrayed Christ in 31 AD. If we add 175 days to April 18th, we arrive at October 10th, 2019. And this date is the 10th day of the 7th month on the biblical calendar. So obviously that's going to be true in any year. If you count from the 12th day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month, it's going to be 175 days. It's 187 days if you count from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month on the biblical calendar, while October 10th is the 10th day of the 10th month on our calendar. So the 10th day of the 10th month is the date that the siege occurred that Ezekiel predicted. So when Ezekiel is predicting the siege using the 390 years and the 40 years, based on the 40 days and the 390 days, they end on the 10th day of the 10th month on the biblical calendar. And he's told that in Ezekiel 24. So in Ezekiel 24, he's told to write down this day because that is the day that the siege has begun. And he's 500 miles away, and the angel comes to him and tells him that this siege has begun of Jerusalem that he had predicted. So the 10th day of the 10th month becomes a prediction of, or a symbol of a prediction. And this prediction, of course, is a siege in this context. Now, what I want to look at is, so I'm going to try to put this, well, I have it here on this paper. Maybe I don't need to write it out, as long as everybody can see it. I'm going to need to blow it up a little bit. Now, I put November 13th here as well. So there you can see I have May 19th, 1780. And if you can't see it, I'll probably just draw this up here as well. But there is 186 years from November 13th, 1833 to trouble here. There we go. So hopefully you can see that well. So 186 years from November 13th, 1833 to November 13th, 2019. Now, in counting 186 years, that's just a cardinal count. When you count from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month, you would count the first day of the first month as the first day. That would be number 1. And the 10th day of the 7th month would be the 187th day of the year. Now, in this case, so when something's 186 years, cardinally, it's 187th. That marks the 187th year. So I just noted that from November 13th, 1833 to November 13th, 2019 is the same period of time symbolically in years and day for year as you would get from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month. And I'm going to draw it up here again. And then we can also see that from October 22nd, 1844 to October 10th, 2019 is 187 years. But if I go from April 18th, 2019 to October 10th, 2019, it's 175 days instead of years. So there's this connection that I can make between the 10th day of the 10th month in 1844 to the 10th day of the 10th month, or the 10th day of the 7th month on the biblical calendar in 2019. Because, and I'm going to try to explain this and illustrate this. So I'm just going to stop the share here and show this again so people can see this just by itself. So we have October 22nd, 1844. So October 22nd, 1844 is the 10th day of the 7th month. And we know that the 10th day of the 7th month, from the date of Judas' betrayal. So if you go to the 12th day of the first month and you count the number of days, it's 175 days. So, but that's because it's always 175 days from the 12th day of the first month to the 10th day of the 7th month. So obviously, if we go to the 10th day of the 7th month, in any year, it's going to be from the 12th day of the first month. It's going to be 175 days. That's just always going to be the case. Now, if we go from this year, which is 1844, and we count 175 years. So I could start here if I wanted to, the 12th day of the first month in Millerite history, and I could count to the 12th day of the first month here. It's going to be 175 years. So there we can see we're applying, in a sense, a day for a year. It's also true, though, that from the 10th day of the 7th month to the 10th day of the 7th month, it's also going to be 175 years because it's the same year. So this relationship between these two dates pointed me to, in 2019, this is April 18th, and this is October 10th. So what I was doing in May of 2019, so this is after this, and actually I even started at this time. So this is May 19th, so, or April 18th, pardon me. So it was in this time here that I was also looking to May 19th. Now the May 19th date is the one that connects us back to the dark day. And so this period of time from the dark day to our time is that 186 years. So we have these connections. Pardon me, it's not the dark day, it's here. From the dark day, it's going to be, it's going to be 239 years. And then from, there's something else I'm missing that I forgot about. Anyway, we'll leave that out. So yeah, when we go from the falling of the stars, it's going to be 186 years. So we'd have to go back here to 1833 and bring us to 2019. So we have this connection between the falling of the stars and 2019. The symbol of the second month, which is the Passover in the second month, which is May 19th here. And in 2019, it's May 19th. And then we also have this connection from 1844, the 175 years, that is symbolized in these 175 days, from April 18th to October 10th. Now the question is, what happened on October 10th? So this was a prediction that was made, and it wasn't really much of a prediction, in the sense that I didn't know what was going to happen. So here were my thoughts at the time, and it'd be nice to, to discuss them with people and see what people think about them. But all I could see at the time, it seems that the events of 2019 are all connected. That is, the spring events, the betrayal, are connected to the fall events, the close of probation. The tokens of the dark day and the falling of the stars are connected to 2019. But the details of the betrayal are not yet known. We would expect to feel the effects this year. So this is in 2019. It is also my conviction that we are to begin giving a message to Israel now. So what I'm saying there, back in May of 2019 is that this is about a message to Israel. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, we have to be giving this message to the Levites, because that's Israel, or to the Protestants, depending on which way you interpret that symbol. Because Israel, of course, can be God's people altogether, but Israel can also represent the Protestants. And that was my thoughts back on May of 2019. So is there any questions on this? I haven't presented this for a long time, and I haven't really presented it more than once. So it's a little bit rusty. Don't remember all the information. Does anybody have any thoughts about this? Of what this might mean?
Okay, so as a question, would you be approaching this on the dark day as when Parminder was attempting to bring away some of those of us that have been following what you and Jeff and others have been saying, and then the falling of the stars being a symbol of those that have made their decision to abandon the movement itself?
Yes, that's what I would be saying, is that the dark day is relating to the rebellion that occurred, to the betrayal that occurred. Now, one of the bad things about what happened later is I don't have a lot of the information. A lot of videos were taken down. I know Parminder went back to the School of Prophets, and I haven't really looked into, because this has been something that I've studied, but I haven't really looked at it since way back, since the end of October. Because this is the next part of the story where we're going to go to, is what actually happened on October 10th. But yeah, so I look at that early history, that spring, what happened in the spring was this betrayal. And I don't know what days, Parminder met with Jeff and Bronwyn in the spring, or when that was, whether it was June or May. So I don't know a lot of this history. I don't know exactly what happened on these various days. But definitely during that time, we see this connection with this dark day in Millerite history, if you want to call 1780 Millerite history, and what's happening in our history. And Ellen White is connecting it back to the time of the fall of Samaria. And we also have the symbol of this second Passover, and this second Passover then is connected to this message that's going to be given to Israel, right? So there's a message that's going to be given before Samaria is destroyed. So how we would understand that? The thing is, as I always say, I'm not great at understanding symbols or interpreting them, putting them all together. I can look at the symbols themselves, and I can show you what they are in relationship to the chronology. So we know that the second Passover has this significance of an invitation, but we also have it connected to the dark day. So we have two different symbols attached to it. One is a call to God's people, a message to God's people. And you can even say it's a warning, because Samaria is going to fall, and there's this call to come back, to the old paths, if you want to put it that way, to come back to Jerusalem. But we also have this betrayal that's connected as well. So we have this dark day, this aspect of it. So when I wrote this was in May of 2019. And I wasn't really predicting anything for May 19th, per se. I was actually looking more to October 10th as going to be a significant period of time. Now, what happened on September 7th, so you're looking at it, can't remember how many days it is before, something like 34 days before October 10th. We have, of course, Jeff stands up, and he recognizes, well, he recognized it before that, but that's the day that he chose to tell us all that the new movement was in rebellion. And, many people were caught up in the new movement, and most of them left. But even I was to some degree caught up because I was deceived by talking to Parminder. He would just tell me that whenever I brought up an objection or something I didn't understand or agree with, he would just say he agreed with me. So he lied to me about many, many things regarding what he believed. And so, of course, you don't know that. I trust people, right? So I trust, okay, it's just your followers who are fanatical. I didn't tell him that, but that's what I was thinking in my mind. These people are going way off track and Parminder's not going that direction. But obviously he was. So that's what happened, in that history. We have definitely we're deceived, we're being betrayed, but we don't know what's happening at first. And it's not till September 7th that we see that. But even then, on September 7th, we still don't know what our message is. We're kind of in disarray. We know that I know that there was this July 18th date, and I didn't know whether Jeff was going to accept that date again or not, because he had in the past, and then that was all pushed aside. So as we're approaching this history, October 10th, we're starting to sort some of this out. But for me personally, October 10th became a very important day, because that's when I came to understand another date. So that's what we're going to go into next. So does that help? Does that make sense? And is that where you're kind of going there? Dwight, you understand what?
I do understand that. The question I'm going to refer back to on the second Passover,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that also for those that had been traveling or those that had touched a dead body?
Yes. Yeah. So they had to be cleansed before, so they couldn't keep the Passover at the time, the first Passover. And yeah, so those traveling, those that had been contaminated, defiled in some way, maybe somebody had died, they had to touch a dead body. Yeah. So how would you relate that then? If you're going to take that second Passover and you're going to try to relate it to what happens in the spring of 2019?
Well, there were several groups that, of course, had left the movement prior to that date.
Yeah.
Yet there were a lot of us that were still, in a way, trying to make sense of a lot of the things that were happening.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got, the symbol of those that have been defiled by touching a dead body. So many of those that went off with Parminder, they had some very odd ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering about the symbolism on that as well.
Yeah, and see, again, we can look at the symbol of it, but how we actually apply it, I'm not sure what the best way to apply that is. But I can definitely see that it applies in some way. Now, the initial idea of the second Passover for this movement was this idea that we're making an invitation, that the priests and the Levites are going to be making an invitation after they cleanse the temple. So the initial idea, and maybe it's not the initial idea, but it's how it developed, had to do with this new movement that we're going to have this perfect church, and we're going to invite people into this perfect church, which didn't really make much sense to me, just for lots of different reasons. One is it's just not how things work. But it was not really very clear what our intentions were, why we were emphasizing the second Passover, other than, that we had the idea, the symbols of the priests and Levites, at least were there. And we know it was an invitation before Samaria fell. Now, Samaria falling is a type of the destruction of Jerusalem. So now that where we're at now, we can sort of see much greater significance in this second Passover than we initially had. But yeah, so you have all these symbols. You have the dark day, you have the second Passover, but you have all these calls or these invitations that are expressed by these different symbols. So I'm going to erase this and basically go into another study and show you what happened on October 10th. So if all you got, if this all makes sense to you, that's good. There may be things that, you know, are not, that I don't fully understand about this. One of the problems I have with this study is I haven't really shared it with anyone other than my nephew. And I might have even posted, like I posted my paper, but I've never had feedback. I've never had other people looking at it, criticizing it. And usually I like to put my stuff out there and have people criticize it, figure out what's wrong, maybe make suggestions. And I never really had that opportunity. Because back in May of 2019, I was outside the movement as far as the movement was concerned. I wasn't personally, I was still following it, trying to make sense out of it, but I had been pushed aside. So Parminder and Tabo and others had basically cut me off, no communication with them whatsoever, other than if I saw Tabo in person, I could talk to him, but he didn't respond to emails. So, you know, I was being pushed out. So there's no real opportunity to share it with anyone, you know, other than my nephew, right? So I shared with him what happened, what I had studied, but, you know, he's not, I mean, he's in the message to some degree, but not completely understanding everything. So that's, you know, that's where I'm at now, is I thought we should look at this. And part of the reasons I presented this is I presented the November 22nd prediction last Friday evening. And so to me, I thought maybe I should look at some of these other predictions that I had. So for me, I was looking at the 10th day of the 10th month, which is the end of this, the 10th day of the 10th month on our calendar, October 10th, which is the Day of Atonement. And I was looking at this as where this was really pointing to. But I didn't know what event it's pointing to. So I didn't know what was going to happen on October 10th. Back in May of 2019. I'm not going to know what's happening on October 10th in 2019. And what happened was an increase of light in regard to the message that we have to give. And that has developed since then into a much bigger message. So the development of the message, you know, we had September 7th, Jeff stands up, and we begin to these studies. He's basically going through his apology and defense, paralleling with Miller's apology and defense. And then like a month later, we're starting to just sort through, we're starting to separate the precious from the vile. It's a slow process. You know, even, but I know by that time, the July 18th date is starting to be accepted. And it's also because when I do this study at that time, I'm sharing with other people regarding what I'm finding, and Jeff is presenting this information in his studies that I find on October 10th. So October 10th is connected with this unfolding of this message. Now, of course, for me, it's important, but it's really interesting how it happens and what happens. So I'm going to try to go through the next part of the study. So when I get to October 10th, a whole bunch of light comes. And since October 10th, light has continued. So basically, I would say, other than the light that was coming from September 7th, you know, the chronology connected with that, there was some light coming. But October 10th, for me, clarified where the movement was going. And the movement has gone in that direction. We've developed this understanding of what our message is. Whether we understand it completely yet, I don't know, but it definitely has developed a lot since then. So I'm going to erase this and we'll go into the next part. Now, I'm not going to go into a detailed part of this study. This study actually addresses the Mayan calendar. And I've done this study other places. But I'm just going to touch on the fact that this is what occurred.
Did you have a question, Chris?
Yes, I did. My question basically was, I think you mentioned it, but I didn't stick in my mind, and I was looking back at it. where did the 175 days or years come from? What was the impetus for that date or that number?
So the 12th day of the first month that's the date in 457 BC that Ezra leaves the river Ahava on his journey from Babylon. So they camp there for 3 days. And this is the date that William Miller uses for the going forth of the commandment. He doesn't use the first day of the first month in 457. He uses the 12th day of the first month. But it's also the date in 31 AD that Judas betrays Christ. And so I had made a prediction that Judas's betrayal was going to occur in the spring, and the symbol for that was the 12th day of the first month. And in 2019, that's April 18th. And that was sort of the date I centered on. And it's actually connected with the whole structure of this betrayal that I'm going to have to one day do a presentation on, because there's lots connected with this betrayal. Some of the details I need to get verified as well. But if you count 175 days from the 12th day of the first month on the biblical calendar, you come to the 10th day of the 7th month on the biblical calendar. In 2019, this is October 10th. Now, the 175 years go from 1844 to 2019. So the fact that I have this date ending it, which is a symbol of the siege of Jerusalem, and also the symbol of the close of probation in 1844, and I can go back to 1844, October 22nd, 1844. And this is 175 years, because this is the 10th day of the 7th month, to October 10th. So these are days, and these are years. So that's why I would say that I can connect this Judas betrayal, which is the date I pick in 2019, as the center of this betrayal, and I can then connect it to October 10th, which is the 10th day of the 7th month. So it's on October 10th that I come to understand something. Now, I'm not going to go, as I said, I'm not going to go through the whole study, but a very simplified way of looking at it is we have 391.5 years, or 391 years and 15 days, do it this way, that go from August 11th, 1840, right, back here, July 27th, 1449. We'll just do it that way. So we have this 131 years and 15 days. Now I'm actually going to take the 15 days off, and I'm just going to do this. And we're going to have July 27th, 1840. Now, when we made our prediction regarding July 18th, (2020), we did it in a way that we had this symbol of 391 years, and we had the kings of Israel, of Judah, from the dividing of the kingdom to the death of Zedekiah, is 391.5 years. So that's the kings after the kingdom is divided. And we know Josiah Litch's prophecy illustrates this, because Josiah Litch's prophecy goes to the beginning of the siege at 390 years, and then there's a year and a half until Jerusalem is destroyed. And so we could see that in Josiah Litch's prophecy, he had 391 years, and then he had 15 days. But 15 days are representative of a half of a month. So we can call them a 0.5. So just as a symbol, these 15 days, which are half a month, are a symbol. So this is 391 years and a half, or 0.5 of a month, where this is 391 years and a half of a year. And it was Stephen Jameson who made the suggestion that we could take this half of a year and put it in prophetic time, and that we could count 180 years to 2020 from 1840. And then what we looked at is, this is the biblical date, the 26th day of the 4th month. So this I applied to 2020 and found that the 26th day of the 4th month was July 18th. And I already had July 18th Julian, which is the 10th day of the 5th month. And that's the date for the destruction of Jerusalem, which is July 31st on the Gregorian calendar. So that's Julian, and this is Gregorian. So we already had this date when we came up with this date. So we had these 13 days in between these two dates, because the Julian and the Gregorian in the 1900s and the 20th century and the 21st century are 13 days apart. And so the idea is that we have this 0.5. Now, in trying to understand this, a lot of people had objections. They say, well, this is kind of a leap. You're just going to take this half of this 0.5, get rid of it as literal period of time. You're going to use it in a symbolic sense instead of a half of a month. It's going to be a half of a year. And then you're going to make it prophetic time. So you're going to do this leap in their minds and then come up to July 18th, 2020. And then you have this 26th day of the 4th month. So this connection here, I mean, it could have been any year. You could have picked the 26th day of the 4th month. Now, we already have the date July 18th, though. And this symbol has shown that it's a very solid symbol. It exists in so many different ways. Over and over and over again, we found that this symbol, July 18th, 2020, shows up in all kinds of structures, in all kinds of places in the Bible. It shows up in the story of Joseph. It shows up again and again and again. So it seems kind of, if we would have picked some other date, no other date would have had the characteristics or the qualities that July 18th has. And as I showed you, July 18th has that particular quality. If you take it as a symbol, 187, from the first day of the 1st month to the 10th day of the 7th month is 187 days. But it's also Samuel Snow's last letter when it's published. It's a symbol of the prediction before midnight. It's got, and I showed you those qualities where if I look at the octal of it, it's 273. It also has the factorization, which is 1117, and the number 1117 is 187th prime. There's just so many characteristics that July 18th has, and that it connects in so many different ways. It's just astronomically impossible for these things to exist randomly. So, but still, people would criticize this. They'd say this 180 years, I don't like it. It seems like a leap. And so I had noticed that this period of time here, this 391 years, is a very special period of time. Now, we know that this is an hour, and then this is a day, a month, and a year. But if we put this day and a month and a year into prophetic time, we get 391 years instead of 391 days. Because a year is 360, a month is 30, and a day is 1. So you have 360 plus 30 plus 1, you get 391 days, and then it's day for a year. But the characteristic of this period of time, because I was dealing with all this astronomical stuff, these calendars, I was dealing with the Islamic calendar and the connections here and here. And the Islamic calendar lines up here as well. So this is the 26th day of the 4th month. And I believe that this date, I can't remember the Islamic date. I think it's the 26th day of the 10th month. But anyway, it's the same date. And so what I found is that this period of time of 391 years lines up with the Islamic calendar, the biblical calendar, and the Gregorian calendar in a period of time where whatever these dates are here, they're going to be the same dates here. And that cycle is a 391-year cycle where these three calendars align. And so I'm not going to go into some of the calculations that I did there, But the period of time that this is, if I take this period of time from July 27th, 1449 to July 27th, 1840, it's 142,810 days. And the thing that was interesting about this was I was looking at the Mayan calendar, and the Mayan calendar has a period of time that's 144,000 days. And this has become very significant. And this is called the Baktun. I'm not going to go and explain the Mayan calendar right now. But this period of time here, if you look at this span of days, it's made up of 12 periods of 11,900 days, 0.833 days. So if you multiply 11,900.833, which is 11,900 days and 20 hours, and you multiply it by 12, you get 391 years. And this has to do with the relationship between the Islamic calendar. The Islamic calendar, every 11,900 days and 20 hours, it actually lines up with the Gregorian calendar, that it passes 1 year more than the Gregorian calendar does. But I'm not going to explain all that. The thing is, this number here is a symbol. This is the 11th day of the 9th month, or it's the 11th month, 9th day. It's a symbol of 9/11 or 11/9. Can represent either of them. But it does represent Islam in the context of 9/11. Does anybody have a question on that?
When you bring up the situation with Joseph, and I know this is going back just a little bit.
Yeah.
A thought struck me.
Okay.
Joseph was the 11th son, and he was sold into slavery when he was 17.
Yes, that's true. So 11 times 17 is 187. So again, you have that 187 show up. And of course, we know he's 17, and there's 11 years, of course, to the butler and the baker. So there's 17 and 11 there as well. But he's also the 11th son.
In other words, could we say that he is a symbol of July 18th?
Yes. This was actually established even before we had July 18th, because we had the prediction before midnight. Now, the prediction before midnight was in 2017. And there's a whole history regarding this teaching that we had in our movement for a very short time. One is Parminder shut it down. It came out of Africa, and it was promoted by Tabo. And it was, in my view, it was correct. There was this idea that we could take Samuel Snow's letters, and we could see in them that there was a prediction that was being made regarding midnight. Now, we know that I had also looked in 2016 at Ezekiel, and Ezekiel's making a prediction as well. And he's making a very precise prediction. He predicts the beginning of the siege, but he also predicts the exact date of the destruction of Jerusalem, the 10th day of the 5th month. And he does it in a hidden way that wasn't discovered till recently. But we had connected Ezekiel to Joseph based on these predictions. We had drawn out these lines, and we had looked at the predictions that happened, because there's all these doublings that occur. So Joseph has 2 dreams, the butler and the baker, that represents 2 dreams, and the Pharaoh has 2 dreams. And there's all kinds of doublings in that line. You have Jacob and Esau are twins. You have some of the stories that double. If you go back to Abraham and Isaac, they both run into, the guy's name escapes my mind, but when they're traveling into Egypt, the name of the person, terrible with names, especially when I try to think of them. But they run into they have the same story. They tell the guy that their wife is their sister. So there's doublings of stories that happen. There's doublings of dreams. There's the 2 periods of 7 years. All through this whole story, there's all these doublings. And that's a symbol of the midnight cry. And of course, we can then connect the story of Joseph to Samuel Snow's message of the midnight cry. And we had done this in 2016. So we'd already established that. And we'd also established Ezekiel's connection with Samuel Snow, because Ezekiel starts on the 5th day of the 4th month, and on the 10th day of the 7th month is the last recorded vision. Abimelech is the guy's name. Thank you, Angela. So they both run into a guy named Abimelech. It's not the same Abimelech, Abraham and Isaac. So we have these connections between Ezekiel, between Snow, and between Joseph. And these are prophets, if you want to look at it in that sense, who are giving this message. And that message was the prediction before midnight. And so Tabo had established this. He'd established also the 3 days in the butler and the baker, and the 3 days at the river Ahava, though in the story of Ezra 7 to 10, there's 3 periods of 3 days that are mentioned. But these become symbols of the prediction before midnight. And July 18th, 1844, is 3 days before midnight, July 21st, when Samuel Snow gets up in Boston. So, and I can't remember what we were talking about specifically. We were talking about Joseph and the 11 and the 17 being 187. So to me, the prediction before midnight is July 18th. That is the message that we have. And we're in the line of the priests, but we're making a prediction that is going to bring in the Levites. That's the purpose of this prediction. So now I'm gonna go back here to this. So thanks for that question. Or comments, the different questions and comments. So when we go back to this history here, what I thought was maybe I could use the Mayan calendar to make a prediction. And I was going to do, and it's kind of hard to explain, but basically I took this period of time here, this 11,900 days and 20 hours, which is represented as 0.833 days. And I looked at this number, and this is, if I started here on the Mayan calendar, and I counted 1,400 or 144,000 days, I would come to a period past this time. I'm just going to go like this. But how much past it would be, I would just have to do the math. And so what I did is I subtracted from 144,000, I subtracted the 142,810 days. And I found that the number was 1,190 days. So this period of time here is 1/10 of this. And I thought that was a pretty big coincidence. So what I did is I took from this date, July 27th, I took, instead of taking this 0.5 and using it to represent this, 180 years, I thought maybe I could use this number here, this 11,900.83, and I could take this and part of the Mayan calendar and add them together, so add these two together, and multiply it by 5, and I wanted to know where I came to. So I have a paper here with the numbers on it. I'll bring this up so everybody can see it.
What made you pick 5, Theodore?
Because of the 0.5. So just simply, we had the 0.5 years here. And so I just said 0.5 is a symbol. So it doesn't necessarily mean half. We've shown that 0.5 can just be represented as 5. And so I just used it as a number. I said, well, instead of multiplying it in the way that Stephen did, just stating that it's 0.5 of a year, I just thought, what if I just take that period of time and I multiply it by 5? Where will I come to? That's the thing that I wanted to see, is where am I going to come to? It's just a curiosity more than anything. Can I use the Mayan calendar's 144,000 day back tune and apply it to this prediction and come to a date? Maybe it'll just come to July 18th. That would be pretty amazing, right? It's actually more amazing than that, in my view, once I really looked at it. So, but that's a good question, because lots of times people wonder why I do the things I do, and they seem really obvious to me. A bit of trouble here. I got to make this bigger so you can see it. Well, that might work. Some people might be able to see it, some might not. Now I have done, a number of studies on this. So these numbers are way too small for you to read, but I kind of need them for myself, and some of you might be able to see it. And people looking on, if they got a bigger computer screen, should be able to see these things. So I have this 391 years, which is, I'm just going to do this as the slideshow. That'll make it even bigger. So let me.
Is this chart available in some of the things you've put out so far?
Yeah, I've mailed this out to you many times. So I'm going to have, now see, this won't work as, this won't work as because it's too, I made it too big somehow. Yeah, it won't work. I'm going to have to use it this way. So we'll do it that way. Yeah, so I've sent you this chart. And what it shows is it shows these 11,900 days, 12 of them in this group, in this blue area. I'm going from July 27th, 1449. And so I got all these are the counting, the 11,900 days. Now I left out the 20 hours for each of them. It just took up too much room. But and the 20 hours, once you multiply 20 hours by 12, you get 10 days. So that's why it's 142,810 days. And so that's 390 years. This is the cycle of the ecliptic. If you start on July 27th, 1449, and you measure all the lunar eclipses, and solar eclipses, they will all repeat again from July 27th, 1840 onward. So within a few minutes of difference of time. So this is a cycle that can be used astronomically. So it's pretty amazing that in the book of Revelation that we have this cycle represented. Now, what I did then is I took these 12 periods of 32 years and 7 months. That's how many period 11,900 days is. It's 32 years and 7 months on a solar year, the Gregorian calendar. It's 33 years and 7 months on an Islamic calendar. So it's 1 year more, because the Islamic calendar doesn't add a leap month. Their year is 354 days. So you end up with this extra year every 33 years. But in order for them to be complete years, you have to go 391 years. So you're not 33 years and 7 months, but it'll be to the year. And so this is a natural relationship between the lunar calendar and the Gregorian calendar, between the Islamic calendar, which is a purely lunar calendar, and the Gregorian, which is a solar calendar. But it also matches with the biblical lunar calendar as well. So whatever biblical date you begin 391 years earlier, you'll have the same biblical date. So you have 3 different calendars that align every 391 years. And that's pretty amazing. Now, the number of Islamic years that you will do in that 391 years is 403 Islamic years. So it obviously has 12 extra Islamic years. So if you live to be 391 years old, if you were Islamic, you would be 403 years old. So that's the way that they measure time. And then what I did is I took the back tune. So the back tune is 1,190 days longer than 391 years. That means it's 1/10 of 1/12 of the entire period of 391 years. And it's technically 3 years, 3.2583 years longer than, that's how many that period of time is, that 1,190 days. It's 3 years and about a quarter. So that's pretty interesting, that relationship. So 3 years and a quarter, which is about 3 months. Any other questions on that?
Couple questions.
Yes.
What's the implication of 144,000 with respect to July 18th?
Well, there's lots of relationships with it. Are you pointing to some particular one?
The actions of the Holy Spirit at that time.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, the way that I would look at it is the 144,000 is a symbol of the priests and the Levites that are going to make up the 144,000. And this is about a message that the priests are going to give to the Levites. So it's an invitation to the Levites. That's what this July 18th message is about. So, so anyway, when I deal with this Mayan calendar, what I did is I took the 142,810 days divided by 12. So I'm taking one of those periods and I'm multiplying it by 5, and I'm adding it to 1/10 of that period and multiplying it by 5, and then adding them together. So that's the way I'm representing the 0.5. I'm taking 5 of these periods, and then I'm taking that difference between the Mayan calendar and our calendar. Yeah, somebody's got their mic on. Okay, thanks. If you can turn off your mic. Yeah. So so we have this this difference, and I multiplied them together, and the number I got was 65,454. And when I counted from July 27th, 1840, instead of counting the 180 years, the 6 months, I just counted these number of days. And that number of days brought me to October 11th, 2019. Now, I did this calculation on October 10th, 2019. So you can see, obviously, if you're making a calculation and you're coming that close to the date that you're at, that was pretty remarkable. And I showed it to my nephew the next day. I showed it to him on October 11th. So he was pretty amazed with that. But that wasn't the end of it. I then just did the exact same thing that I did with the 391 years, with that period of 11,900 days. And I applied it to the 144,000. So I did the same thing. I took 1/12 of 144,000 and multiplied it by 5. So that's basically, obviously, 12,000 by 5. And then I took 1/10 of that, 144,000, and 1/12 of that, just the same thing I did with the 142,810 days. I did the same thing with the 144,000 days. Now, the number I came up there was 66,000. So I had these two different numbers. And so when I counted these dates here, I ended up with October 10th, October 11th, but it was on October 10th that I figured this out, 2019.
Can you switch the view?
Yeah, okay, thank you. And there we go. So I did this calculation, and I took this 65,454, I believe is what I said it was. I have to look at my notes here again. I always get it backwards. Yeah, 65,454 days. And that brought me from here to here. So this was based upon this number, 11,900 times 5 plus 1,190 times 5. And these were two were added together, and I got this number of days. So I came to October 11th. So that was one day from where I made this calculation. I'm on October 10th making this calculation and saying, well, this comes here. But it's obviously not July 18th. Now remember, I had predicted October 10th, but on October 10th, I get this new light, and you'll see how it applies. So then I did the same thing with the 144,000 number, and I started here on the same date, but I'm going to count, and I'm going to go over here. And this gives me 66,000 days. So I count 66,000 days from July 27th, 1840, and I want to see where it brings me to. Now it brings me to another interesting date, which is April 9th. Now, April 9th, 2021. So this brings me past July 18th, and this one's short. Now, this date, April 9th, is March 27th on the Julian calendar. So that's something that's important to note. March 27th, 2021, which we have already as a Gregorian date, where we count 273 days. So in our structure, we got December 25th, 2021. We have March 27th, 2021. We have July 18th, 2020. And we have over here, November 9th, 2019. And this is that structure of 777 days. And this is 252 days. This is 252 days. And this is 273 days. So this is a symbol of the Levites. And so is March 27th, because it's 273. But this date is going to bring me past this March 27th by 13 days. But it's going to give me March 27th on the Julian calendar in 2021. Now, so that was kind of interesting. I had this one here. Obviously, it was connected. I'd made this prediction on, or did this calculation on a date that I had that I'd made a prediction for regarding the message that we're going to give. But when I did this calculation, and I did it the same day, and I came to this date, March 27th, I said, well, this is at least a significant date. I can understand what this date is about. As a symbol, it's about the Levites. Well, what I wanted to know is what's in between these two dates. So I wanted to know what's in between October 11th, 2019, and April 9th, or March 27th, depending whether I'm Gregorian or Julian, 2021. And the date that's in between is this date. It's July 10th. Now, this is 8 days short of July 18th, but what's more significant is actually the number of days that this period of time is. So this period of time is, if I can remember, it's 546 days, I think. Yeah, 546 days, which if I wanted to find the middle, I would divide this by 2, and I end up with 273 days. So this date, from October 11th, 2019, July 10th, 2020, is 273 days. And from July 10th, 2020 to April 9th, 2029, or 2021, which is March 27th, Julian, is also 273 days. So I now had this other structure of 273 days. Now the date in the center, July 10th, as a symbol, is the 10th day of the 7th month. And it's 8 days before July 18th. So the symbol of the 8 days is there. And this is the priests cleansing the temple before they give the message to the Levites. Or the Levites are then going to do their work of cleansing, and then they're going to give the message, to the rest of the world, the priests and Levites together. So this was what happened. We came up with this, and Jeff presented this right away. I sent him an email. He presented this idea. He didn't present all this math, but he just knew that I'd come up with this July 10th date. And in November, when I was there at the School of the Prophets in 2019, I did present this. I presented this whole thing. And so Jeff even again affirmed, that this made sense, this July 10th date. But it's all about this message to the Levites. And so when I had this other presentation, which pointed to October 10th, and then on October 10th, I then found this structure. It showed me that the message, what happened in 2019 with, Judas's betrayal, we now had a message again that was going to develop. And this message has been developing in this history. And we know when we get to July 18th, we will understand a lot more about what that message is, even before then. We have June 27th as another date, July 10th, we have July 18th. And then there's more dates even after July 18th and went into 2021 that are going to become these significant events as we pass through them. Right now we're studying them, but we don't know what everything means. So this is not a great representation of this study, but it does show you that what I believe that's happening, and that we as a group need to figure out. One is we need to study things in the past that have been left, these loose threads that have been left, alone. We've not really completed some of these things. And we see this happening. We see this happening by different people studying different areas. And these things are coming together in our studies. So the thing that Jeff is very good at, that God has given him a gift for, is to take things that other people have found and to make sense out of them, to fit them into this whole picture that we have of this message. And so there are some things still, that we haven't really addressed completely. And so I wanted to put this on the record. I wanted to put that the dark day and its relationship to this message, but also seeing how it connects to this, which I presented before, but people didn't really fully understand the significance of how I see it anyway, of why this message was given regarding the Mayan calendar, or where it comes from, the Mayan calendar. And so we have all these calendars: the Islamic, the Mayan, the Gregorian, the Julian, the biblical calendar, the rabbinic calendar. They all end up witnessing to this message, and in various different ways. And they're all telling us the same thing, yet they're adding more details. They're adding more layers of detail. And I've said for a long time in this message that this message reminds me of a medical anatomy book with the transparencies that you lay over top of each other, where you have the bones, and then you put the nerves, and then the muscles, and all the different layers, and the organs, and that's what we see happening in this message. Another, of course, powerful way to look at this is wheels within wheels, Ezekiel's message, and of course that's really what this is. This is God taking all these different lines that are all interlocked, and so we see in the story of Joseph, we have these powerful symbols that are being understood, even though they were understood to some degree. The study that Odilio gave on Sabbath, I guess he did the presentation on the line of Joseph. Some people would attribute that to me because I'm the one who's presented that first, and Odilio is always referring back to me on that. But it actually comes from Johannes Koletsky. He's a German who in April of 2010 published that chronology and has some of that information there. He puts the chiasm with the 17, the 11, the 11, the 17, He also connects it to the story of Christ, to the line of Christ, the 2 periods of 30 years. So there's a whole bunch of things that Johannes Kolecki does that I found in 2016. Some of it on my own, and then when I had found it, somebody sent me his paper. That's why I know about it, because they said, well, you're teaching the same thing that Johannes was doing back in 2010. And so now we see that as we progress in this message, we just get more and more light. God keeps unfolding these things from the past. So just to tie this up, this reminds me so much of what happened in 2018. And I came to understand in 2018 from the Spirit of Prophecy that Ellen White says that as we pass over the ground of fulfilled prophecy, those events will reflect light back on the past. And those events, now that they're seen, they will shine light forward into the future to light our path. And she uses the classic example of this is, of course, the cross of Christ. When Jesus dies on the cross, that event shines light back on all the types and symbols from the Old Testament. But it also points forward. And we're now in the middle of prophecy being fulfilled. And it's as we pass over the ground of fulfilled prophecy that we can then see the significance of past events, their types, their symbols, what they mean. And those symbols will then shine their light forward. And there's a lot of talk about, well, what happens if July 18th doesn't occur the way we expect? You know, what if we're disappointed in some way? And all I can say is that whether it happens like we're predicted or not, I know that God has been leading in this movement, but also I know that if we come to that date, no matter what happens, we will see much more clearly where we're at. We have to be faithful. We have to, trust that God is leading. We have to understand the evidences to some degree and have faith in them. To me, this chronology in and of itself is just an amazing testimony. It's not something that could be created by man. Man could not do it. Man could not conceive of these things or create the structures that exist. It's obviously God's hand that has led us this far. And I'm confident that he's going to continue to lead us as long as we're faithful. But, I still, to say what I expect to happen on July 18th, I know that as we approach it, I'm going to probably be more confident about it. I still have doubts, not doubts in what God has done, but doubts in our ability to understand or predict the future in a specific way. I know the chronology is correct, the dates are correct, but maybe there's something that we're not seeing about the timing of that event and its relationship to those dates. But I think that we would see that once we get to July 18th, if it doesn't happen the way we expect, whether it's July 31st instead, that Nashville gets hit by a nuclear attack, or whether it's some other date in some other way in which we understand these things. So thanks everyone for the questions, and I welcome any more questions. Okay, so
the title of this is The Dark Day, and we're in the notes a mention of the falling stars. Do you see the Lord's getting ready to shake the earth, and he's going to shake the heavens? Do you see a sign in the heavens prior to July 18th?
I don't know. I don't look for signs in the heavens. We actually have had signs in the heavens in connection with this message, but it's not understood yet. But I'm not looking for some particular sign. But we have had in the past. As part of our structure, we already have the sign of Revelation 12, which happened on September 23rd, 2017. And that was, a pretty important date in this message in 2017. But the sign of the Revelation 12, if you look up the Revelation 12 sign and look up September 23rd, 3rd, 2017. You can read about that. So we've already had a sign in the heavens. But the other thing, just dealing with the falling of the stars, we know that Muhammad is shown as a star falling from heaven, and that's 186 years from the falling of the stars, which is the 187th year would be, or the 187th year is the 2019. But if you actually counted 187 years cardinally, that's going to be 2020. So if you count from the falling of the stars in 1833, and you take that 187, which is a symbol of July 18th, it goes to 2020. And so if Islam, and the falling of the stars, many people interpret Ellen White's vision regarding Nashville as a falling star. And there's definitely similarities between what a falling star would produce and what a nuclear bomb would produce. So I think that there's definitely a connection if we're going to look at the falling of the stars. And the falling of the stars, I'm just going to do a quick look here on my computer, just dealing with this. I looked this up before and I just can't remember. So that was 1833, and it was November 9th. Or not November 9th, November 13th. And that date on the biblical calendar was the first day of the 9th month. And in 2020, in 2020, November 13th, 2020, is on the Islamic calendar is the 27th day of the 3rd month. So it's another symbol of 273. So there's significance in that connection between the falling of the stars in 1833 and what's going to happen in 2020. And that message is connected to Islam, and the Islamic calendar, of course, gives us this symbol of the 27th day of the 3rd month. So I think it's pretty interesting in that, to that degree, if you're going to apply these symbols. So anyway, that's the end of this study, unless anybody else has other questions. I know there's probably things going on in your minds, like little connections here and there that you're going to have to think about. Some people say they watch these again and they get more out of them the second time. But these studies I've sent them to lots of you. I've sent it to email, but I will send an email again, an email study of this. Yeah, you can find it online. It's the study on the Mayan calendar. So if you're interested in that, you can read that study on the Mayan calendar. But I will send it to everybody in this mailing list, so you can have that complete study that goes along with the Dark Day study. So,
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so let's close with prayer, and then we can say our goodbyes after. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the Sabbath hours. For here, they're still a little ways away, but we look forward to the Sabbath fellowship that we can have, even if for many of us it's online right now. We know, Lord, that there are going to be many blessings being poured out in the next number of weeks as we approach July 18th. And we ask for forgiveness for our sins, for our lack of faith, for the time that we have wasted in wandering away from you. But we are thankful that we're able to redeem the time as we engage in this study. I pray for each person here, for the various struggles that we face, and ask, Lord, that you can help us to be faithful. Thank you again for giving us this light and this privilege. And we pray for the School of the Prophets and for the presentations tomorrow, and for all the studies that we're going to be doing over the next little while. And I pray for the studies that I've been doing on biblical chronology and on Daniel chapter 11. I know, Lord, there's many things that I have to learn about Daniel 11 that I don't know. And I know that many of us feel that way about so many things. There's things that we understand, but things we don't. So we ask for your Holy Spirit to help us in our personal study. And we pray this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.